screw the pooch. Specialist Morin repeated quietly, her translator visibly struggling. It's an idiom, Marcus offered helpfully, turning his head slightly in her direction with what appeared to be genuine desire to assist. It means you made a mistake. Drop the ball. Missed the mark. Put the cart before the horse. He paused. Those are also idioms. Sorry, human language is mostly idioms when you get down to it. We're metaphorical people. Carvish hit him again, this time a sharp, precise strike across the jaw. I heard something crack. Blood sprayed from the human's mouth in a bright arc and patted against the metal floor in a sound like rain. Marcus Webb worked his jaw once, then spat something small and white onto the grating. He watched it skitter across the floor with what appeared to be mild curiosity. Then he looked back at me. You know what I was doing, he said, when your guys came through my ceiling. I don't particularly care. I was having lunch, he continued, undeterred. An exceptional lunch, actually. Turkey on sourdough, Swiss cheese, tomato, and this garlic aioli that our station cook makes completely from scratch. Hand-pressed, properly emulsified, the real thing. I had maybe 3 bites left. 3 bites. He shook his head with what appeared to be genuine mourning. And then you guys crashed through my ceiling like the bargain bin version of a commando raid and ruined what was shaping up to be a genuinely solid afternoon. The fleet positions, I said again, keeping my voice level and professional. I genuinely don't know them, Marcus said. But here's a question I've been sitting with since you started this whole process. Has this ever actually worked? Has any interrogator, in the entire documented history of intelligence gathering across any species, ever had someone respond to getting punched by thinking, well, now I definitely feel cooperative? He considered this sincerely. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm asking as someone with a genuine intellectual curiosity about your methodology. I nodded to Carvish. What followed was systematic rather than spontaneous. 3 measured impact to the ribcage, 2 to the face, 1 strike precisely placed to impact the kidney. The sounds filled the chamber. The flat percussion of blows landing, the scrape of the chair against the floor, the wet sounds that I had learned to read as a medical vocabulary of damage. Blood ran down Marcus Webb's chin and dripped steadily onto his torn uniform, forming a small dark constellation of stains. His head hung forward for a moment. His shoulders shook. I heard laughter. Quiet at first, just a soft, disbelieving chuckle that might have been mistaken for a cough. But it grew. It built from something small and private into something full and terrible, genuine laughter that shook his damaged torso and sent fresh blood bubbling at the corners of his mouth. It was the most wrong sound I had ever heard in that room. It was the most wrong sound I had ever heard anywhere. What? Specialist Morin said from behind me, her voice very carefully controlled, is wrong with you? Marcus lifted his head. His good eye found her. He was still laughing, though it was taking visible effort and causing him visible pain. And he did not stop. What's wrong with me? He said. What's wrong with you people? You grabbed the wrong person. You're asking me questions I can't answer. And your entire interrogation philosophy is apparently just, I am hitting you now. Now I am hitting you again. Oh! Here's another hit. It's like you learned intelligence gathering from a children's educational program. He paused to cough, then resumed. I mean that as constructive feedback. I want to see you improve. Carvish roared, a sound that had silenced entire rooms of hardened warriors, and drove his fist into the human's chest with everything he had. I heard ribs give. The sound was distinct and terrible. Marcus Webb's head snapped back, and he coughed violently, a spray of red catching the light. He straightened, slowly, with evident cost. That smile was still there. Here's something I want you to understand, he said, his voice gone wet and ragged around the edges, but still, impossibly, infuriatingly, steady. Here's the thing you're fundamentally missing about my species. He paused to breathe. We are really, really good at pain. I mean unreasonably good at it. Do you know what humans do for recreation back on Earth? I said nothing. We climb mountains, Marcus said, not because there's anything useful at the summit, not because survival requires it, just because the mountain exists and we decided we wanted to be at the top of it. We jump out of functional aircraft for entertainment. We pay money to watch 2 people beat each other into unconsciousness and call it sport. We eat food that causes us genuine physiological distress and describe it as a delicacy. We voluntarily submerge ourselves in ice water and then tell each other it builds character. You are insane, I said quietly. That's probably partially true, Marcus agreed, with a tone of someone making a fair concession. But consider this. Human women give birth without anesthesia, have done it for the entirety of our species' existence. Our soldiers have been documented breaking their own bones and continuing to fight because stopping wasn't an option they were willing to entertain. We have surgical records of individuals performing operations on themselves in survival situations. There's a documented case, he paused to spit more blood, a clinical interruption, of a man who amputated his own arm with a blunt pocket knife because the arm was trapped beneath a boulder. The process took over an hour. When it was done, he walked unaided out of the canyon, drove himself to a medical facility, and was discharged 3 days later. Another pause. He subsequently wrote a book about it. People bought the book for inspiration. The chamber was very quiet except for the distant hum of station systems. So when you hit me, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone reciting established fact, it hurts. I want to be transparent with you. It genuinely hurts quite a lot. I am not going to pretend otherwise. But I am a human being, and human beings are apex persistence predators who evolved over millions of years specifically to keep moving long after the point where any rational species would stop. We chase prey animals to death across open plains. Not with weapons, just with relentless pursuit. We would simply follow something until it collapsed from exhaustion. Pain isn't an obstacle for us. It never has been. It's just information. It's just Tuesday. Carvish looked at me. I had been conducting interrogations for 23 cycles. I had a framework for every response, every strategy, every psychological gambit a prisoner might employ. I had never, in all that time, encountered a moment when I genuinely did not know how to proceed. This was that moment. You're lying, I said, because it was the only available option. You're attempting to psychologically destabilize this interrogation through fabricated claims about your species' physiology. Am I? Marcus asked. His voice was almost gentle, almost kind. Then explain why I'm still conscious. Explain why I'm still forming coherent sentences. You've fractured my ribs. You've likely caused internal bleeding. You've given me what I'm fairly confident is a moderate to severe concussion. His eye met mine with a directness that was somehow worse than defiance. It was simply assessment. And I'm sitting here discussing evolutionary biology and sandwich condiments with you. Does that fit your model of normal prisoner behavior? It did not. Nothing about this fit any model I possess. More pressure. I heard myself order. What followed was not interrogation. I had been in this profession long enough to know the difference between extracting information and simply inflicting damage, and I knew, somewhere beneath the professional exterior I was struggling to maintain, that what was happening in that room had crossed the line between the two. Carvish and his partner worked in alternating rhythm. They were not restrained. They were not careful. I watched bones break with the quiet, clinical detachment of a man trying very hard not to process what he was witnessing. I heard the sounds that bodies make when pushed past their tolerances, wet, dense sounds, nothing like what is depicted in combat narratives. I watched blood spread across the floor in a slow, dark tide, and through it all, Marcus Webb laughed. Sometimes it was a quiet sound, private and internal, the chuckle of a man enjoying a joke only he could fully appreciate. Sometimes it broke open into something enormous, a full, booming laugh that filled the chamber and seemed to press against the walls. Once, after a sequence of blows that should, by any biological logic I had studied, have produced unconsciousness, he paused, gathered himself with a visible effort that was almost theatrical, and said, "A human, a Cathore, and a Garnati walk into a bar." Carvish stopped mid-motion. Even violence can be interrupted by sufficient absurdity. The bartender looks up and says, "What is this, some kind of joke?" Marcus continued, and the human says, "No, but your interrogation technique definitely is." The joke was not funny. The situation was not funny. There was nothing in the room, at that moment, that contained any humor whatsoever. Marcus Webb laughed at it anyway. A horrible, glorious, blood-soaked sound that bounced off the gray walls and the gray floor and the gray ceiling, and Specialist Moyne backed up 3 full steps toward the exit without appearing to realize she had done it. "Stop," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "Stop. Step back." Carvish lowered his fist and stepped away, breathing hard, his knuckles dark with a human's blood. The other guard followed. Marcus Webb hung in the chair, held upright only by the restraints at his wrists, his head drooping forward, his entire body a catalogue of damage that should have translated into silence and stillness. Both eyes were swollen. His nose had been broken at least once. Several teeth were gone. His uniform was so soaked through it had changed color. He was still smiling. Slowly, with the mechanical deliberateness of something that has been broken and chooses not to acknowledge the fact, he raised his head and found my eyes. "Here's the thing you should probably know," he said. His words were blurred at the edges now, consonants softened by swelling and missing teeth, but the meaning was perfectly clear. "The reason I've been laughing this whole time, it's not a psychological defense mechanism. It's not shock. It's not bravado." A pause. "Well, okay. It's maybe 20% bravado, but mostly, it's because you made a genuinely catastrophic tactical error." "And what error is that?" I asked. Despite 23 cycles of professional discipline, despite everything I knew about maintaining interrogation dynamics, I could not stop myself from asking. Marcus Webb looked at me with his ruined face and his impossible smile. "You took a human prisoner," he said simply. "More specifically, you took a Terran Colonial Marine prisoner. And the thing about the Marines, the thing that is maybe the most important thing about the Marines, is that we have a policy." He let the word sit for a moment. "A very specific, non-negotiable, has never once been suspended policy about leaving people behind." He paused. "We don't." The station alert system screamed to life. The sound hit the room like a physical force, a sustained, cycling wail that was immediately followed by the crackle of Morin's emergency communicator. Through the static, I heard fragments, weapons discharge in the outer corridor, hull breach reported on Level 4, security personnel in Sectors 2 and 7 were non-responsive. Someone was shouting about a docking bay that had been compromised. Someone else had stopped transmitting mid-sentence. "That's probably them now," Marcus Webb said, in the exact tone of voice one uses when a friend arrives slightly later than expected. I want to say for the record that I was very confident in the timeline, but I'll admit the last 20 minutes were starting to test my optimism a little. The door to the interrogation chamber didn't open. It ceased to exist. The explosion came in within a single percussive instant, a focused breach charge applied with precision engineering, and then the room was full of smoke and sound and movement. I threw myself sideways and hit the floor, pressing against the base of the terminal cabinet, debris raining down around me. Through the chaos, through the smoke that smelled of scorched metal and propellant, I saw shapes moving. Human shapes. They moved wrong. That was my first coherent thought as the smoke began to thin. They moved with a speed and density of purpose that didn't match their size, smaller than the cargo, smaller than most of our security personnel, and yet they filled the room the way fast-moving water fills a space, finding every angle, covering every corner, occupy the entire tactical reality of the chamber in the time it took me to register they were inside. "Target acquired," one of them shouted. "Webb, you still with us?" "Define with you," Marcus called back from the chair, and his voice carried something I hadn't heard in it before. Not relief, exactly, but something warm. Something fundamentally human. "I'm conscious and talking, if that counts as a passing grade." "It counts," said the figure moving toward him, and from her voice and her movements I understood she was the one in command of whatever force had just torn through our facility. Carvish reacted the way trained warriors react, with immediate, committed violence. He was enormous, even by Krago standards. He was armed. He had trained in combat under high-gravity conditions for his entire adult life. He had put down larger opponents than any human he had ever encountered. The exchange lasted 4 seconds. I watched it happen with the fascinated horror of someone witnessing something they cannot fully process. The human soldier who engaged Carvish was half his mass. She didn't attempt to match his strength. She used it. She read the angle of his charge and redirected it with minimal contact, a fraction of force applied at precisely the right point, and Carvish's own momentum carried him into the wall with a sound like a heavy door slamming. Then she was inside his reach, striking with clinical precision at the specific nerve clusters along the neck and jaw that produce immediate neurological shutdown. a chokehold applied with geometrical accuracy. And Karvesh, who had once stayed conscious and fighting for 40 minutes after sustaining damage that would have killed most species outright, went down in silence. "Rule 1, said another soldier, moving through the room with a weapon raised and voice utterly calm. "Never kidnap a Marine." "Rule 2, said a third, covering the corridor entrance. "If you do kidnap a Marine, don't give us time to find him." "Rule 3, said the first. "If we find him, pray you treated him well, because the alternative makes us angry." She said the word angry in the quiet, conversational tone that makes it infinitely more frightening than shouting would have. The restraints came off Marcus Webb in a single efficient motion. For a moment he simply sat there, and I wondered if the damage had finally accumulated beyond his body's willingness to pretend otherwise. Then he stood. He swayed. One long, precarious moment where gravity seemed to be negotiating with him, and steadied himself with a hand against the back of the chair. Then, with the serene audacity of a man who has decided that pain does not get a vote, he stretched. His broken ribs protested audibly. He winced, made a small sound of acknowledgment toward the pain, and dismissed it. "Lieutenant Davis," he said, "appreciate the punctuality. Relatively speaking, you look like something a salvage crew pulled out of a debris field." "Sergeant," the lieutenant replied, already moving to support him. "You should see the other guy," Marcus said, glancing at the unconscious Karvesh with a fond sort of satisfaction. "Actually, you literally can. He's right there on the floor. I'd call it roughly even." "You didn't land a single strike," I said. My voice came from the floor, from where I had pressed myself against the cabinet. It came out hollow. Marcus Webb looked down at me. The smile was still there. Stained, broken, absolutely unconquerable. "Didn't need to," he said. "I just needed to keep you all busy long enough for the cavalry to arrive. That's the other thing about humans. By the way, we are exceptionally good at buying time. It's a cultural specialty." He held my gaze for a moment longer, and in his eyes saw something that wasn't cruelty, wasn't triumph, wasn't even anger. It was something far quieter and far more permanent. "And we never leave our people behind. Every species in explored space is going to learn that eventually. Some of them are going to learn it the easy way." He looked around the room. "Some of them are going to learn it today." I learned afterward what 12 Marines had done to our facility. 12, against a station staffed by over 200 personnel, housing automated defense systems rated to repel infantry assault, protected by security forces drawn from multiple heavy-gravity species with generations of combat experience. They breached us in 4 simultaneous points. They neutralized our automated systems not by overwhelming them, but by understanding them. Someone had studied our defense architecture with a thoroughness that implied either extraordinary intelligence work or a terrifying amount of patience, possibly both. Our security forces were engaged and neutralized with controlled, almost surgical violence that was somehow more psychologically devastating than simple brutality would have been. They didn't fight like they were in a battle. They fought like they were completing a task. The difference, I came to understand, is enormous. Most of our personnel were incapacitated rather than killed. This was not mercy in the conventional sense. It was message sending. When a force capable of killing chooses not to, the restraint itself becomes the most frightening thing they can demonstrate. Throughout all of it, Marcus Webb walked with his rescuers. He walked slowly, pausing occasionally to lean against a wall when the pain peaked beyond negotiable levels, and each time he would wait a moment, recalibrate, and continue. I heard him, at one point, tell the Marine providing him medical support to stop hovering like a mother hen. I heard the Marine respond by injecting him with a compound without breaking stride, and telling him to be quiet and let the medication work. "You guys are absolutely no fun," Marcus said. Then he noticed me, watching from where I had been secured with the other surviving staff in the corridor. He stopped walking. "Velcrren, right," he said. He had remembered my name. I found this, somehow, more unsettling than anything else that had happened. "I want to apologize for the damage to your floor, and the door situation, and the general." He gestured vaguely at the smoke-filled corridor, the distant sounds of security systems failing. "All of this. But you did kidnap me, so I feel like the moral accounting here is roughly balanced. No hard feelings on my end." He considered. "Well, some feelings. mostly in my ribs, but none of them directed at you personally. I said nothing. What was there to say? They were gone in 19 minutes from first breach. They left behind two things: a comprehensive, annotated document detailing every exploitable vulnerability in our station security architecture, left, I understood, not as a gift, but as a demonstration of exactly how thoroughly they had studied us, and a message, transmitted simultaneously to every communication frequency our facility used, addressed to the Cathore Empire's military command structure. The message contained 4 sentences. We know where you are. We know who you are. We know what you did. Do not take our people. And then, beneath the formal text, as if added as an afterthought, we will always come for them. Always. I submitted my report 3 days after the incident. I was methodical. I included everything, every observation, every exchange, every moment that had deviated from established behavioral models. I included the medical assessments. I included the security analysis of the breach. I included my own psychological evaluation of the prisoner and my professional conclusion regarding what it represented. I concluded with a formal recommendation. It is my considered professional opinion that humanity should be reclassified as a Category 7 threat species, not on the basis of their technology, which is comparable to our own, not on the basis of their numbers, which are significant but not overwhelming, but on the basis of their psychology, which is unlike anything in our threat assessment literature. They are individually dangerous in ways that transcend physical capability. They are collectively unstoppable in ways that transcend tactical calculation. Any military engagement with humanity should be avoided with the same strategic caution applied to a class extinction event. They do not break. They do not stop. They do not abandon their own. We made a mistake. Do not make it again. My superiors read the report. I was told, diplomatically, that I appeared to be experiencing trauma-related cognitive distortion following a stressful operational incident. I was given medical leave. My report was filed. The Cathore Empire moved on. 3 months later, the Empire declared war on the Terran Colonial Alliance. The strategic logic was sound, on paper. We outnumbered them. We had superior naval tonnage. We had the element of surprise, or believed we did. The projection suggested a conflict of 8 to 12 months, ending in a negotiated settlement favorable to our position. The war lasted 6 weeks. It ended when a force of Colonial Marines. The precise number remained classified, but the estimates I have seen suggest fewer than 50 individuals assaulted the High Command facility on Thros Prime during what should have been a diplomatically protected summit, and captured the entirety of our military leadership in a single overnight operation. Not killed, captured. Every senior officer, every strategic commander, every member of the War Council, taken alive and unharmed, secured and processed before the station's night cycle had ended. The humans sustained 12 casualties across the entire 6-week campaign. 12, in a war that cost us over 300,000. The peace treaty was signed in Detention Block 7, Station 17. The humans had requested the location specifically, and our new leadership, still somewhat dazed by the speed with which the old leadership had been removed from relevance, had not been in a position to object. I was required to attend as a formal witness. I stood in that chamber and watched the remnants of the Cathore Military Command sign documents of unconditional surrender. I watched the human diplomatic delegation accept those documents with a professional courtesy that somehow made the whole thing feel worse than contempt would have. I stood in the room where I had interrogated Marcus Webb, and I understood, with totality that I had not permitted myself before, exactly what I had been trying to tell my superiors and exactly why they had not been capable of hearing me. After the signing, while the delegations were still arranging themselves for the formal documentation, I found myself standing near the interrogation chair. Old professional habit, I always oriented toward the center of a room. I looked at the chair, and then I looked at the wall beside it, and I saw something I had not noticed before. Something that must have been done in the minutes before the rescue, or in the chaos immediately after. Carved into the metal surface was something small and sharp. The letters were irregular but legible. Webb was here. The sandwich was worth it. I was reassigned after the incident. My career in intelligence effectively concluded, not through formal sanction but through the quiet professional consensus that I had been present for something that had changed me in ways that made me unsuitable for the wake. I was not wrong about this assessment. I accepted it. I think about Marcus Webb sometimes. I wonder if the injuries healed cleanly. Human medicine is more advanced than I had appreciated before the war, and the reports I later accessed suggested he was discharged from medical care within 6 weeks, which seemed impossible but was apparently consistent with documented recovery timelines for his species. I wonder if he went back to his supply depot, back to his boxes and his scanner and his lunch breaks. I wonder if he tells the story. I suspect he does. I suspect he tells it at whatever social gatherings his people favor, and I suspect he makes them laugh with his impressions of the discount action movie villains who kidnapped him from a sandwich. I wonder if he understands what he did. Not the tactical part. I think he understood that very well, perhaps better than I did at the time. But the other part, the part where a single broken, bleeding man sitting in an interrogation chair laughing at his torturers ended an empire's certainty about itself. The part where defiance expressed not as rage or heroism, but as simple, stubborn, blood-soaked humor cracked something in us that military defeat alone might not have reached. He didn't break us by resisting. He broke us by laughing. He looked at everything we could do to him, the pain, the fear, the very real possibility that he would not survive the day, and he found it, at some essential level, absurd. And in doing so, he revealed the truth about his species that no intelligence briefing had ever managed to capture, that humans do not experience the universe the way other species do, that somewhere in their long, violent, improbable evolutionary history, they made a strange and terrible bargain with existence. They accepted that it would hurt. They accepted that it would be hard. They accepted that it would, often, be deeply unfair. And then they laughed anyway, and kept moving. You can break their bones and they will keep walking. You can rupture their organs and they will keep talking. You can do everything within your power to destroy them, and they will look at you through swollen eyes and smile with broken teeth and make jokes about sandwich condiments, and they will be buying time the entire while, because somewhere outside your walls, their people are coming. Their people are always coming. There is a saying in the intelligence services now, pass quietly, officer to officer, in the careful voice use of things that are true and dangerous to say too loudly. They will laugh at you, and then they will come for you. I heard that laughter once. I heard it fill a room where a man had every reason to be silent, every biological incentive to surrender, every rational justification for despair. I heard it, and I did not understand it until too late. I understand it now. They are not the darkness between stars. They are not the monsters that other species imagine in the quiet hours. They are something that does not fit those categories, because those categories imply something alien, something other, something you might be able to understand if you studied it long enough. Humans are not other. That is what makes them terrifying. They are something the universe produced and then, perhaps, briefly reconsidered. A species that looked at the cold mathematics of existence, the pain, the loss, the absolute certainty of death, and decided that the correct response was to keep going anyway, loudly, together, laughing at the parts that hurt the most. You cannot frighten them into stopping. You cannot hurt them into stopping. You can only watch them get up one more time and keep moving and understand, finally, when it is far too late to matter, that they were never going to stop. My name is Velcrren Thros. I served the Cathore Empire for 23 cycles. I interrogated a human once. In all my years of service, I met brave warriors, determined soldiers, unbreakable minds. I met beings who faced death without flinching, beings who held their secrets until the very end, beings I respected deeply even across the distance of conflict. But I never met anything like Marcus Webb. I never met anything like humans. I don't think I ever will again. I don't think the universe produces a particular combination of stubbornness and absurdity and loyalty and pain tolerance and laughter more than once. I hope not. Honestly, once was enough to end an empire. Once was enough to understand. I will never make that mistake again. End of record. Officer Velcrren Thros, Cathore Intelligence Service, Cycle 23 to 7 archived by Hybrid Shadows Historical Documentation Division. A story from the intelligence archives of the Cathore Empire as recorded by Senior Officer Velcrren Thros for the Hybrid Shadows Historical Archive. My name is Velcrren Thros. I have served the Cathore Empire for 23 cycles as an intelligence officer. In that time, I have walked through the smoke of 100 battlefields, sat across interrogation tables from creatures that could crush stone with their bare hands, and stared into eyes that held the cold, calculating fury of species that had been making war since before our civilization learned to write. I have broken Garnati berserkers, those infamous warriors who feel no fear and know no surrender. I have extracted classified intelligence from Meloran spies so deeply conditioned that they could not even feel pain in conventional sense. I have watched soldiers from a dozen different worlds, beings of extraordinary courage and physical resilience, eventually bow their heads and beg for mercy. I was good at my work, perhaps too good. In 23 cycles, I had never failed to get what I needed from a prisoner. I had never left an interrogation chamber without answers. My methods were not cruel for the sake of cruelty. I was professional, not a sadist, but I understood the mechanics of breaking a mind with cold, clinical efficiency. I understood the language of pain, the grammar of fear, the slow, inevitable sentence that ends with surrender. I thought I understood everything there was to understand about interrogation. I had never met a human before that day. The prisoner was brought into detention block 7 at approximately 1400 hours, station time. I was standing at my data terminal reviewing the intake report when I heard the commotion in the corridor, the heavy, rhythmic thudding of cargo boots on metal grating, the clatter of restraint chains, and beneath it all, something else. Something I couldn't immediately identify. A sound that didn't belong in the pre-fight corridor leading to an interrogation chamber. It sounded almost like humming. 2 of our largest security personnel, both cargo heavy welders standing nearly 3 meters tall with shoulders broad enough to block a standard doorframe, dragged the prisoner through the entrance. They were not being gentle. The human's hands were bound behind his back with military-grade composite restraints, the kind rated for species twice his size, and his feet barely touched the floor as they hauled him forward. His uniform was torn at the shoulder. His face was already a study in recent violence. One eye swollen nearly shut, the skin around it blossoming in deep purple and yellow, dried blood crusted in dark ridges around his nose and the corners of his mouth. He was smiling, not a grimace masquerading as bravado, not the tight, defiant sneer I had seen on soldiers who were desperately trying to convince themselves they weren't afraid, not the hollow, glassy expression of someone already retreating behind psychological walls. A genuine, relaxed, almost amused smile. As if someone had just told him a moderately funny joke, and he was still enjoying the afterglow of it. I stared at him. Karvesh and his partner stared at him. Specialist Moyne, our medical observer station near the rear wall with her monitoring equipment, tilted her elongated head at an angle I recognized as profound confusion. She had witnessed hundreds of interrogations. She had never seen an intake smile. Designation. I asked, pulling up my datapad with practice efficiency. Marcus Webb, the human said. His voice was roughened further, I suspected, by whatever treatment he had received during capture, but it was steady, conversational, even. Sergeant, Terran Colonial Marines. Service number 73,942 Echo. He paused for exactly 1 beat, as if timing a punchline. And before you go through the whole formal procedure, I already know the Geneva Conventions don't technically extend to deep space jurisdiction, but I figured I'd mention them anyway. You know, for the principle of the thing. I stared at him for a long moment. The cargo guard stared at him. Specialist Moyne's translator implant emitted a soft, confused chirp. You find something amusing? I asked. Plenty. Actually, Marcus Webb said, his single functioning eye traveling around the room with what appeared to be genuine aesthetic appraisal. For starters, you really need to reconsider the interior design in here. Gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling, that low humming sound that I assume is supposed to feel ominous. It's very committed to the evil empire aesthetic. Very vintage. I can appreciate the dedication to a theme. I genuinely can. But maybe a plant? Something with color? Just a thought. I gave Karvesh the signal. The cargo guard's fist moved with the speed and force of something designed by evolution for heavy gravity combat. The blow connected with the human's midsection with a sound like a hammer striking dense wood. It was not a cautionary strike. I had seen that same impact collapse the ribcage of species considerably sturdier than the human standing before me. Marcus Webb doubled over, folding around the impact, coughing hard. The guards hauled him upright before he could fall and force him backward into the interrogation chair, a metal frame engineered for maximum discomfort, with no padding, No ergonomic concession, positioned directly beneath a light designed to shine at precisely the angle most likely to cause sustained eye strain. He was breathing in careful, measured pulls. Testing the damage, I realized. Cataloging it. When he looked up at me, the smile had never left. It was simply somewhat more strained at the edges. "Okay," he said, his voice slightly winded but still conversational. "Okay, that one genuinely landed. I felt that in my pancreas. Or possibly my spleen. I'll be honest with you, I'm not terrific with internal organ geography. Biology was never my strongest subject." "Where are the human fleet positions?" I asked. "You know what's interesting?" Marcus said, as if I hadn't spoken at all. "You grabbed me from a supply depot. An unmanned, low-security, deep space supply depot. I count inventory for a living. That's my entire job description right now. I walk around with a scanner and I count boxes and I make sure the numbers on the boxes match the numbers in the system." He paused. "I'm not even combat infantry anymore. I got reassigned 8 months ago after I blew out my knee in a training exercise. So if you're expecting me to have classified fleet deployment data stored somewhere in my brain, I want you to understand that you have, quite significantly, screwed the pooch on this operation.